just to warn you, this is going to be a talk-heavy episode, if that's important to you. Hey gang, let's look at an old repair and the effect that it's had over time. The patient today is a 1971 Gibson SJ, a Southern Jumbo. We've worked on SJs in the past, a number of them. This version is from the Norlin era, Norlin being a large corporation that purchased Gibson in the late 60s, and for the next decade and a half or so tried to keep the brand's prestige alive while fending off the low-cost alternatives that were erupting from abroad. But in the end, in the 1970s, Gibsons like this are often seen as having been compromised to a certain extent by bean counters and head office decisions that weren't maybe completely respectful of the company's history. I'm not sure that's entirely fair, because Gibson was doing some weird, bizarre stuff long before Norlin arrived. Look at the plastic bridges, the plywood bridge plates, etc. from the early 60s. In any case, this is a square-shouldered SJ. That's a design feature that shifted in these guitars back in 1963. Prior to that, they had the round-shouldered look of J45 or something. It wasn't the first square-shouldered dreadnought in the Gibson line. And I think most of us will concede that this shape it's a Martin shape, right? They're not fooling anybody. But the Hummingbird came first. That one debuted in 1960, and I guess this was continuing in that vein. You know, they wanted to make something that was maybe a little less flashy, but had that look. The guitar needs new frets, according to the owner. For one thing, they're quite low. They're averaging around 25 thousandths. But also, this thing had a neck reset a long time ago, I think, in an era prior to our current method of removing necks. You know, in the past, to access the dovetail joint, the thought was you'd simply cut through the fretboard all the way down to the neck wood at the body joint. You can peel the extension off, and then you could pour boiling water down into the gap at the end of the dovetail, let the glue soak that up, prod at it with palette knives and such, and you'd pry and wiggle, and after a lot of fighting, the neck would come free. I say a long time ago, but in the grand scheme of things, it was just 1.5 generations of repair people. This whole taking the neck off thing is very new. And the other thing people need to know is these guitars were not designed to be taken apart. That was never a consideration. And the fact that they can be separated, neck from body, is sort of accidental, a happy accident for us, based on the adhesives and the joinery that we used, but it was never intended. Over the last 40 years, we've kind of gotten a handle on how to do it, but to this day, there is an element of risk, and in some ways, it's destructive. To change the neck angle, we remove wood. Is that like resetting a stopwatch? Because the same forces are going to be at play on the instrument, trying to fold it up again, and in 25, 30 years, will it be necessary to do another reset? Or is there maybe some sort of magic equilibrium that's reached where the guitar will remain inert and stop distorting? How many neck resets can we do? Okay, I'm going to get long-winded here for a minute, because this is going to bring up a question that I get asked regularly, to the point where it's annoying, almost to the point where I wonder if some concerted effort or campaign is underway to influence me to talk about it. Well, if so, you win. It's time. Someone will show up in my inbox, and sometimes it's my spam folder with a suspicious email handle with, a bunch of numbers on a funny name, suggesting that I react to a certain video on YouTube espousing the ideas of Australian luthier John Miner. He's got a YouTube channel. You can check him out or not. He's come up with a system whereby to reset a neck, he clamps a piece of heavy section square tubing to the neck, piece of aluminum. So he clamps the body down onto a board, and then he puts this big tube on, clamps that to the neck to keep it straight, and then applies pressure down on the headstock end to tilt the neck back relative to the body. He then shows himself spraying steam from a portable steam cleaner unit onto and around the neck block and under the fingerboard extension. The idea being to heat up this area enough to get things plastic and to be able to squeeze the distortion out of the guitar, which has caused the neck to come forward, raising the action. How much squeezing? In other words, how much backset on the neck? John uses a metal straight edge on the tops of the frets and extends it out to the bridge, which is a familiar method. But in the videos he's made, and this is a screenshot from one entitled "A New and Better Way to Reset Your Acoustic Guitar Neck," the straight edge is shown hovering above the surface of the bridge by what might be 6 or 7 millimeters, approximately 1/4 of an inch. In another video, he says it's usually about 1 to 2 centimeters. That's 3/8 to 3/4 of an inch above the bridge, which is a tremendous amount of setback. You're really stretching the guitar to do that. In normal neck resetting, that would give the average practitioner a heart attack, because it would mean something went terribly wrong in your procedure. And this suggests that there's going to be significant and unpredictable spring back. And I would expect that. You know, it's the same when heat straightening a neck. You never really know how much it's going to take. The thing is, how much spring back or how much clearance over the bridge is kind of brushed off. His exact words are, "It doesn't matter what clearance you have. They always come back a bit. And if at the end the clearance is too high, you can just use a slightly higher saddle." Which I think for a professional working on other people's guitars, those parameters are way too loose. I have to know what that's going to be. And this steaming process with the guitar all clamped up, it recurs, according to him, maybe 6 times over the space of a month. Except in another video when he says, "I usually only have to do it about once." And he checks the neck frequently. I don't know what he's checking specifically, because he doesn't demonstrate. I suspect that you'd be looking at the relationship between the fret tops and the bridge again. Does that change a lot during this process of steaming? And I don't know. In one of the video descriptions, it states that hundreds of people have used this method with 100% success. There is another YouTube video in which a gentleman tried the method on a Taiwanese Yamaha and did not have success. He speculated it's because they sealed the inside of their guitars and the steam maybe couldn't penetrate. Here's my reservation. Without being able to predict the actual final neck angle relative to the bridge height, this is useless as a procedure for professionals doing work on high-end instruments. Because with the setup shown in the video, if that neck doesn't spring back, the guitar is going to be in danger of self-destruction with an overset neck that requires a saddle with like 9 or 10 millimeters exposure over the bridge. The bridge is going to crack because of the excess torque, or it's going to lift off the soundboard, or you maybe won't be able to string the thing because of the extreme downward angle to the slots. You know, they'll just slingshot the pins right back out at you. Next up, Mr. Miner has produced 4 different videos on this subject in 3 years. He's actually re-uploaded the same video twice, making that 5 videos released, which is interesting. But this is important. In no case do we see the procedure from start to finish or the end result. And in 3 of those videos released over 3 years, he's demonstrating with the same guitar, which he apparently never gets around to actually finishing. So the alarm bells are ringing. Realize I've got nothing against John Miner. It's entirely possible he's found a great method for saving old guitars that aren't valuable enough to put a lot of money in with a traditional neck reset. The issue I have is that it's unproven. If he's interested enough in propagating this idea, he can make a video or a series of videos showing the procedure from start to finish, filmed over 2 months or whatever it takes him to do it, to outline the whole thing in detail with results. I film neck resets maybe a dozen times a year, in some cases even where things go wrong. But the main thing is, as of now, this method that I keep hearing about every month is undocumented. It's untested, not peer-reviewed. In scientific terms, it's unrepeatable. If John or someone else wants to take that up and do the work, I fully support that. And like I said, Neck resetting is a relatively new technique, and there are, advances to be made. Here's what I don't like. People who have no experience in a discipline, like guitar repair, emboldened as they are by the internet, running around and wasting the time of people who actually do the work by trying to tell them that they should be doing things differently based on a half-baked video they saw online. In this case, there are people who see Mr. Miner's videos, they proclaim a new dawn has arrived, nothing will be the same, and all you highfalutin repair dudes are cheating the public out of hundreds of dollars when you should be spraying steam inside a 1947 J45. Because that's obviously the way to do it. Everyone knows. Armchair lutherie is the only thing less profitable than the real thing. It's not even a satisfying hobby, because you end up with nothing to show for it. So that's it. That's my comment. If another person asks about this procedure, I will ignore them. And just to be clear, I'm telling you now, don't act like a fool in John Miner's comment section, because that would be stupid, and we need less idiocy. You're smarter than that. So the action on this guitar is kind of holding its own. It's 7/64 on the bass side, 6 on the treble, which is a bit higher than I'd like. There might be some movement available to us with the adjustable saddle. Haven't checked that yet. But the real reason things are in here, we've got an issue around the body joint. If you like that note, you can have it again on the next fret. So, this happens with a lot of Gibson guitars in general, but especially with neck resets that have happened like this. I don't know exactly when this entered the repair technique vernacular. It was featured in Irving Sloane's repair book, which was early 70s, and it must have been picked up and became popular enough that I've had to deal with it several times over the years. And I quickly realized just how flimsy this is. We're relying on maybe 2 millimeters worth of thickness in rosewood end grain to hold up in the area of the guitar here that is it's the focus of all of the bending forces right here. I immediately wondered why those people in the past made it hard on themselves. Why didn't they simply move the cut 1 fret up and make it at the 13th? Leaving a nice little landing pad of neck wood there to support the joint and strengthen it and make it easy to align. Because it's really difficult to get these two parts to fit properly so that a fret is going to be, reasonably level with its neighbors. The thing is, I've never encountered one of these cut at the 13th fret. It's possible this particular technique wasn't around long enough for someone to have that light bulb moment. Oh, just do that. Anyway, I'm going to be using much taller wire because that's what the player wants, and we should be able to dress out this discrepancy in height because there'll be enough thickness to work with. I make the fret hot. Then I pull the fret out. I started leveling in the area of the bump, but stopped pretty soon because I realized something. That's a funny sound. I had to glue that up and clamp it level and flat. It's very hot and humid. My dehumidifier is pushing hard to keep things under control. In the summertime, I try and keep the humidity in the 40s, if at all possible. That seems to be a good range in which to work on guitars. Here's an interesting case that points out some of the things that can happen to a guitar that's used outdoors in the summertime. The owner's been playing a lot of outdoor gigs recently, and it's been both very hot and exceedingly humid. The relative humidity was in the 80s and 90s last week. Some guitars are more sensitive to humidity than others, but she's had some incidents with some buzzing in the first position, frets 1, 2, and 3. That usually points to a lack of relief in the neck. In other words, the truss rod needs to be loosened to allow it to come forward slightly. I did that a few weeks back and got rid of the buzz. I noted at the time that the action was quite a bit higher than the last time I saw it, which was back in January. No real surprise there. But it happened again. On stage, the buzz came back, and also some tuning issues. Like, tuning the tuners wasn't doing very much, and then boing, that grating noise that happens when a string is hung up inside the nut, and it finally releases, that sound. It got brought in the other day, and when I played it, I noticed that there wasn't much buzz at all going on, but there was a bit of lisp from some low nut slots, though. The other thing I noticed when I pulled it out of the case was a sound hole humidifier, one of the big ones that sort of covers the entire sound hole. As Canadian players, we tend to hear about the importance of humidification early and often because it gets super dry here in the winter. However, it's also possible to over-humidify a guitar. What happens? Well, you know that there's an arch that's built into most acoustic guitar tops. When the box gets saturated, that arch increases as the wood expands. This is the only place it can go. That will bring the action up because the bridge carrying the strings is riding on top of this hill that's happening. There's another subtle effect of over-humidification when playing outdoors, and that is the fretboard can expand too. Now, it's got one surface that's exposed to the elements, and sometimes heat, if the sun's falling on it, and the other side is not. It's attached to the neck. I know someone who actually burned their fingers quite badly on guitar strings that had been sitting on stage on a 100-degree day. But having that one side exposed and the other glued down means there's an unequal condition where the outside is expanding, like the guitar top, the inside isn't. And when that happens, it can push the neck into a back bow situation because the wood has to move somewhere. And if there's any relief in the neck at that point, it goes away. It becomes flat or goes into a back bow. On a guitar that has a very low nut height, either through wear or intentional setup, this can cause that intermittent situation where it will buzz in the lower positions sometimes when the neck is fully hydrated. Now, checking this out, the low E string here is about 18 thousandths off the first fret, and it gets, closer from there. Checking with the finger test, the D string is sitting right on top of the fret, and the G is pretty close. There's some space on the B. The E is on the top of the fret as well. So there's no leeway here. We need a couple of extra thousandths of an inch to keep this thing playable in hot weather. I normally set up a guitar like this with 21 or 22 thousandths clearance between the fret and the string at the first fret. So it's new nut time. Oh, and what about the tuning thing? When you heat up most substances, they're going to expand. And that includes both steel strings and nut materials. It's not much, mind you, but the nut slots are pretty exacting. Usually they're cut within a thousandth or two of the diameter of the string. What can happen, especially on guitars with very deep slots, is a squeezing effect. The strings basically get pinched. To counter this, we can remove the excess height. And we've talked before that you really only need about half the diameter of the string under the surface of the nut. In that case, even if things get super hot, the string won't be pinched. It may be squeezed upward a little bit, but that's all. And, nut slots need maybe a thousandth or two clearance. Sometimes we could push that a bit, but I don't think it's necessary. We're just going to make a new nut that's properly shaped. This one has probably seen enough action. It's time for a new one. All set. After a couple of days in the humidity-controlled shop, the action actually came down almost a 64th of an inch. It's pretty cool. Working on some shop maintenance, replacing the plastic IKEA drawer slides in the inexpensive drawer units I use. Every year a few of these break, and I have to upgrade them. As you know, I hope, I work in a very small space, and I got a lot of stuff. Friend of the channel Adam Savage has a valuable tool storage concept he calls first-order retrievability, where it's good to have things visible, and stuff shouldn't be behind other stuff, but that doesn't really fit with my situation. I'm the complete opposite, I think. My brain likes things in drawers, It's just an efficient way for me to use as much volume as I have to work with. And for some reason, I don't need to see the stuff to know where it is. I've got one of those kind of memories. I got some metal filing drawer sets, which are another IKEA product called the Helmer. They were on sale a few months ago and a very good deal, and I've been looking for a time in which I could put them together. Assembly involved bending sheet steel, kind of tab A into slot B sort of thing, and it was a very interesting way to put these together. Maybe not the most user-friendly, but sturdy enough. And, they're lightweight in terms of their capacity, but they'll do what I need them to do. 24 more drawers to populate with jig parts and sundries. With that much storage, labeling becomes necessary, and for that there can be no better device than the Dymo plastic embosser, straight out of the 1950s, and it never loses its charm. For some reason it came with black tape, and I'll have to replace that with classic red, just because. Back to the SJ. To refret, I use the StewMac number 149 wire, which is very similar to Gibson's jumbo fret of the 1970s, which is about 104 thousandths wide. But the StewMac stuff is quite a bit taller, which can come in handy in cases where you've got to remove a significant amount of height to make things work. And yes, it polishes up nice. The frets ended up about 16 thousandths of an inch taller than previous, so a new nut was in order for this one too. Set to go. I got an interior shot of another early 70s Gibson that was in last week, and it demonstrates some of the Norlin era tomfoolery. Let's have a look. Here we can see the Gibson Double X bracing, where a second set of braces are half-lapped behind the bridge and intersect with the main X braces. These are all super tall and extremely wide. It's like having the chassis for a tractor trailer installed in a passenger car. The bridge plate, too, is exceptionally thick. It's like twice the thickness of a 1950s Martin. And then there's the big bolt for the adjustable saddle, which, as you can see, has been drilled right through the arm of the X-brace, and it's peeking out on one side. Oh, good times. The funny thing is, despite all this, you will occasionally run into one of these guitars that sounds and plays like a dream. It's amazing what you can do to a guitar and still have it sound like a guitar. And this one is one of those guitars.